Up next, we have a talk from Tom Chavez, Senior Evangelist at SOASTA out in the Bay Area. Tom boasts 20 years of experience in product management and software development and delivery domain. Comes to us today to talk about 7 steps to pragmatic mobile tests.
Thanks so much, Simon. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming. Really glad to see you here. We've got just 45 minutes. I think the talk will go fit in this time, including time for Q&A. I did bring some fun giveaways. They did say bring your own cups, so I brought water bottles here. And for people who've been busy playing Pokemon Go all day or have other reasons that your battery is running out, I've got 2 battery chargers here, so I've got some giveaways for fun. I'll send around my little Ziploc baggie. I reuse it. So I like this conference. It's very green themed. So I brought my reusable baggie. If you have a business card, you can drop it in. If you don't have a business card, I've got little blanks here that you can fill out. So during the 45 minutes, we'll just let this thing weave its way through the room. If you want to be in the drawing, put something in. If you don't want to be in the drawing, then we won't. So we'll go ahead and get started. This talk is about steps to help you building a better test plan. And it looks at different tools and techniques you can use to make sure that your mobile app will be tested well and have a good experience for your users. And it's a combination of things I've learned over time, combination of different tools, hopefully some things that you haven't heard of before that might open your eyes, things that'll challenge you to work with your dev teams, your marketing manager, maybe even the public about working on your app and your testing. Thanks, Glenn. All right, so these are the 7 steps. The talk has been posted, so you'll be able to see these. I also have, if you go to SOASTA.com, the company that I come from, we do have this written up as a white paper on our website, and you can download the white paper and get more detail than I'll even cover in this talk. But let's talk about things that are making lives of testers more difficult. Test plans are getting more difficult in our companies in that functional testing is not enough anymore. Performance testing is a part of our delivering of mobile apps. If an app doesn't perform well, people will defect from that application, even if it's functionally working well. My kids didn't like the first edition of Pokemon Go because it wasn't performing well. And why wasn't it performing well? Well, it was having issues on the back end. So you've got performance as an issue now that wasn't there before. You've also got shorter product cycles. How many companies are trying to get you to go agile or are already agile? Everybody agile? All right, half the people in the room. And agile to many people means these crazy short product cycles, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, even 2-week development cycles. If you watch the delivery of your copy of Facebook or YouTube, it is literally getting an update every 2 weeks. And if you're looking at web apps, they're being delivered in different pieces multiple times a day, but we'll just focus on mobile side. This is my iTunes update screen. It says all of these apps need to be updated. It's always amazing every time I go into it. I thought I cleared it out, and then it's got another set that are ready to be updated. We've also got device platforms. We've got all the different Android devices. Of course, you don't have to worry about the Fire anymore, but you can worry just about the iOS. And now we've got iOS 10. I haven't gone to iOS 10 yet, but boy, Apple is pushing me really hard to upgrade to iOS 10. I guess I'll just flip the switch one of these days. I wanted to wait for 10.0.1, and now they're already up to 10.0.2, so I guess they found a few bugs. We've got this changing focus. Analytics is becoming a much bigger part of testing also. Again, much more than just pass-fail, but what are the details of the functionality and the focus. And this looking at big data, we're collecting a lot more data from our applications while they're running, so we've got to focus on analysis that's also required. So what will help you the most? Step 1, of course, you have to know who is using your application. And there are different aspects of the user of your application. Time. What time of day do they use the application? How much time are they spending using the application? If this is an application that is very immersive, like a reading application, you want to have part of your test plan be soak testing to see, does this application run for an hour or 2 hours? Or is it something that's going to be done very quickly? A messaging application, is it just in and out? Or is it a weather application where you just want to get an update about something? So when is this application being used? Is it being used in the daytime, in the evening, on the weekends? Is it being used for long periods of time or short periods of time? And build your test cases to match this. It doesn't make much sense to have a weather application tested for 20 hours straight, unless maybe it's during a hurricane situation. Where is the application being used? Is it being used in a room like this where we've all got good Wi-Fi or we've got a good signal? Or is it being used in your car where you're driving around and your connection is good, then bad, then good, then bad, and then working, and then not working? What is the location and how is that going to impact the performance of the application? If it's being used just within one location, you're going to see a very different characteristic of the application than if it's being used across different locations. So be aware of how location impacts. And also, what is the intent? Is the intent of something, again, like I mentioned before, is it something that's very immersive, like reading a book, and a very slow and calm and relaxing experience? Or is it a game that's going to be very frenetic? And is the time in the application, are we going to be panicked and trying to get something done quickly or very relaxed? So one way you can find out if you don't know the answers to these questions, of course, is talk to your product owner. Look at the market information that might be available about the product. You might be able to sit in on a focus group from your product team and validate all of the above with real user monitoring. And that's a phrase I'm going to be bringing to this talk that you might not have heard before in applying to testing and building out a test plan. And I'll talk about it throughout. So I'll keep talking about RUM and real user monitoring. Real user monitoring is instrumenting your application to collect data like this, knowing when is a user using your application, what does a session link look like, what are the pages and the screens of the application that are being used. It's something that comes from the web world that's being applied to the mobile world too. Knowing your application, step 2. What is the developer's thought of how a user will use the application versus how their users actually use it? We build an application with a plan of what a user will do. They will start at the beginning of the application. They will log in. They might click that continue as guest button. So what would that path look like? And if they could click the login button, they might have to log in or they might have to register. What do those paths look like? And what are the paths through the application? And what is the end goal of the application to deliver? We either want to deliver a feature, we want to deliver a product, we might want to deliver a purchase, something to make money. Maybe we just want to deliver Pokeballs. I'm going to use Pokemon Go as anybody. How many Pokemon Go former users in the room? Anybody? I was in the park the other day. Yeah, a lot of former users. I hear former. Used it, spiked, spent some money, not so much anymore. They've got to bring out an update to get it. But for me, it's a perfect use case of multiple failures that caused it to succeed and peak and fall. I was in the park with my daughter the other day, and I still, as the evening came, just these glowing screens, everybody was walking around. So what are the common paths that your customers are actually using versus what the developers intended? What are the paths that people are actually using? And if you look at like a path like this, you see a beautiful set of stairs and a path right next to the stairs. And this is what happens in real life, and this is what happens in our applications too. There's the intended path, and then there's the path that the users chose. And if you don't have any observation of why the users are actually using that dirt path or how they use that dirt path beside the stairs, you might not know any data like, well, were they on bikes? You know, stairs and bikes really don't work well together, so maybe they were on bikes. Or is that faster because they were coming from that direction and heading to that direction, so it's just faster and people are lazy and why go on the stairs? So that's where real user monitoring comes in. If you're watching your users and what they're doing, you'll see what path they're taking through the application and why it might not be the path that you thought they would use. Maybe nobody logs into your application. Well, why? Why should they not register for my application? Well, because the registration screens were more difficult, or there was no value added when you were as a registered user versus a non-registered user. And if you have a user revenue generating pattern, your goal is really that the users go down that path, then they go down the free path. So you have to make that path, you have to see why they're not following down that path. And that you'll get from analyzing your users. A tip here, using real user data to create the test cases that match what the users actually do, along with giving the feedback back to the developers of what the users are doing and what they're not doing. And also, look for the problem areas in the application. And that's in knowing your application, when you're monitoring your users, you'll see where the application is crashing and where the application is not crashing, and that'll be a good area for working on future test cases. So here's an example of an output screen from a real user monitoring product. This happens to be from a product that my company makes available, and we have a free version of this product. So if you want to instrument your application for collecting data like this. This is from the web version of it, so we get extra data. But things like location, where are most of my customers? Well, in this application, most of their customers were coming from the United States, and then small numbers of customers from every other country. So when you're looking at which versions of the languages you should be testing your application in, you can focus on the ones where your customers really are. Also from, this one came from what type of browsers, but over here we've got which parts of the application were customers spending the most time. They're spending equal amounts of time in this part of the application and this part of the application, 29 and 26%. And looking at, again, this is looking at a web application, what versions of OSs they were coming from. But iOS and Android, when you're collecting data from a device, you can get which version of iOS and which version of Android and even which device they were using. So you can get the details of what versions should I be testing and on which pieces of hardware should I be testing the application. Don't bother testing on a piece of hardware that nobody's using your application on. And you get this from a real user monitoring product. Building out a test matrix. Not all tests are equal. Of course, you have to test the core functions of your application, and you want to test those core experiences that are important for delivering your functions to your customers, what your goal is to deliver. But also, if your application is one that has specific differentiation features that make it better than others on the market, you'll want to test those. Those are a requirement, must-have. But you need to know what are your edge functions. What are the features that are maybe not core and are farther away from the core parts that are edge and could be maybe prioritized lower than others. They're still part of what you should test if you could test all features of your product, but they're not going to be as important. Again, if you know what your customer's using in your application, you can differentiate between those edge functions that are not being used and the ones that the customers are using. Complicated. If it's a complicated test, it might be one that might have less time for testing it than other things that are more, again, toward the core. And likewise, if something is a repetitive task, that's something that you're really going to be looking at for as a possibility for automation. Logging into your application, doing the same smoke testing of your application is something you're going to try and look as a strong candidate for automation. And if you know how much manual effort is involved in all of these tasks, you can then decide which of these might be more, good candidates for automation, or if it's something that is complicated and manual, it's probably going to get less likelihood of being automated, and it's something that might have to be done by your manual testing process. In the room, how many of you already have, for your applications, I could start with how many are doing manual testing. That's probably part of it. How many already have some automation of your product testing? Okay, and anybody think they have full automation of their product testing yet? Full, all right, well that's high confidence. You can come up, but we'll share you maybe to share some of that, of your success there. And if you know how many person days per cycle per area it takes, that's also a measure of part of building out your test matrix and knowing how long different parts of your testing are taking. And your tip here, use this matrix once you've filled these out to know which are your core, how much time they're taking, which are repetitive, which are manual, to decide which are the tests that you can that you can work on automating. Knowing your devices. So many devices on the market. Of course, Samsung's number one in the Android side, and iOS, of course, all you have are Apple devices. But you need to know which of the devices that your customers are using. And again, real user monitoring will give you the information about which are the active devices and which are being used the most. You might not know whether your application is being used more on tablet or on mobile unless you actually have the data from your customers about it. And that will give you key insights into how to test across them. Then you'll also see which of the devices that are giving you problems. And that might be because of the OS release on that device, or the software that's on that device, or just the age of that device. There are many different things that might make a certain device more problem prone than another. And then here's that expensive question. Which devices must you own for testing, and which devices and how to decide which to own versus which devices that you might want to borrow or rent. Well, if you know which devices your customers are using, you can prioritize those higher than the devices that you have much less access to, or your customers have less access to. If you have a customer base that is outside of your area, that's a great candidate for devices to borrow or to rent. And now here's another question for the audience. Is anybody using a remote device cloud already, whether it's Google's devices in the cloud, or we've got also the Amazon devices in the cloud, we've got Perfecto Mobile, we've got different companies with devices in the cloud. Great. If you haven't had an experience with that, one is they all have a free version of their product that lets you put in a certain number of hours just to get hooked on their devices. We have a partner, NTT. They've got devices in Japan. As a developer, I don't have access to devices from Japan. I don't have them in my lab, but I have direct access to theirs over the internet. They're put in an NTT data center. The connection is as fast as it can be between my office in California and their data center in Japan. I get, I think, about 13 to 15 frames per second on those devices, so it's almost as if I've got the device in my hand. And for automation, it's a great system. My automated tests are happy to wait for the small amount of latency for those devices. So with knowing your devices, with the data you collect, you can make your decision of which devices to own and which versions of which devices you can just get from a testing device cloud that's external to yourself. And again, here's where your monitoring will come in and give you the data. We can see exactly how many devices are being measured across the different data points that are coming in. And between the first and the second, in this one, we had twice as many coming in from the first and the second. And each of these can be broken down to much more fine granular detail. Remote device clouds, this is an example from the NTT folks. This is called Remote Test Kit. These are all devices across different versions of Android and different versions of iOS, all different resolutions. We've got tablets and phones, and even different carriers. So if you wanted to have NTT Docomo and KDDI and SoftBanks in here too, you can get different devices again in their test cloud, and you just rent it for 30 minutes, or you rent it for an hour, and you can make it part of your automation that can rent these through an API and add it to your tests, make it available to your testing, and then make it release the device after 30 minutes or 60 minutes, however long you need it. Or you can do manual testing on it if you have a bug that can only be reproduced through a manual test case. Okay, a little bit about automation. If you're not doing automation, I always say start yesterday, because it's the only way to give time back to your testing cycle. Every minute of automation that you put in that can be run across 5 devices or 10 devices serially, or even in parallel, even better in parallel, is time you'll get back that you can spend on doing something else. So start with the simplest thing, automating the starting up of the application and quitting. Some simple smoke tests that for every build of your application can just do a quick test of does the application run and does it run and quit. Then if it runs and quits, does it run and log in and do a simple step and quit? Taking those time-consuming tasks can also be a great thing to for automation, because automation doesn't care how long it takes to do something, it will just do it for you. And especially those mundane tasks can be automated well, so that your testers and yourself don't get bored with these types of repetitive, mundane tasks, and can give those to the automation suite. You also want to look at the testing rhythm, is what is the pattern of testing and how can we automate that? And last, the goal is continuous integration. And hopefully everyone in the room knows the term continuous integration and knows tools like Jenkins, and has these tools. Hopefully the people who said they have full automation, but it's continuous integration that will let you, for every check-in of every build into a build of code, automatically test that code as soon as the check-in is done, so that the developer can know very quickly, is it functionally correct? And then later it could be a part of the performance. Is the performance correct? And is that code good enough to pass on to later versions of later parts of the release cycle? Mobile performance. This is the one where the newest twist that's part of the testing program that is one of the more difficult things to do. There's so many things that affect the performance of an application on a device that can't be emulated so well inside of a simulator. Things like the battery and the CPU and memory usage. The network, of course, is going to affect the performance of an application. So these are things that are now part of your application testing too. And you'll see in certain testing tools that data can be collected from the tool, or even in a RUM system, that returns back what is the level of the CPU usage during each step of the test and how much memory is in use during each step of the test. And importantly, here's an area where I think Pokemon Go and Niantic didn't test so well, is what's the level of the battery during the use of this application, and bytes sent and received. Battery's an interesting one. There's an example. I think they said that Pokemon Go was a great way to sell extra rechargeable batteries like these ones I brought here, because it was burning up the battery. Well, what are all the reasons it was burning up the battery? Anybody know what are some of the things about it? What's one reason? Radios, right. It was using the GPS radio, the cellular radio, which is out of the two radios between the Wi-Fi radio and the cellular data radio. The Wi-Fi one is cheap and easy and fast, and the cellular data is the hard one because it's trying to connect up to an antenna as you're moving from point to point. You're moving around town. That's using up a lot. So GPS. Also screen brightness. Kids are out there at night and get into the later hours, or even in the daytime, you need some screen brightness up. And what about AR? It was doing a 2D graphics on top of the camera. So we have the camera turned on, we have a graphics engine turned on, and a CPU managing all these things at the same time. So if they were to look at all these graphs at the same time, this is maxing out, this is maxing out, this one's falling, and this one's going crazy. So it was also, I think it also sold some data plans too. It's increasing of need more data. So Pokemon is my favorite, is the gift that gives to a tester's nightmare for things that need to be fixed and monitored. Again, what is the common user path through an application during which you monitor all of those things so that can a user accomplish their 2 hours of immersive experience in this application, or are they going to have a failing scenario and they're just going to be frustrated, and then the app store is going to be filled with negative comments about how much they hated this application. You might also look at how much time it takes to load each screen of the application as part of performance. Nobody likes staring at a spinner, or even watching something progressively draw. And there are things that are directly in the device, like how complex are the graphics that are being used to draw that. But there are things outside of the device. How long did it take to get the data that is being displayed on that screen that is part of that drawing process? What is the throughput? And that brings up the concept of back-end and front-end performance. And here's, again, another example from Pokemon Go, or any application that has a back-end that fails. The front-end application was working just fine. It was waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for data to come in. But the back-end system was not delivering the data. And there's a reason why the back-end wasn't performing, because you're looking at what time it takes to get data to a customer in a front-end versus back-end scenario. Most of the time is typically spent in the front-end drawing of data after data comes in. So a backend may perform well, but in the case of Pokemon Go, the backend didn't perform well either. So it had to wait for the data to come in, and then it had to draw the data that came in from the backend system. When you're looking at a well-performing backend, you can focus on just the in-device functionality, but you also have to be measuring how is that backend going to be performing, and look at the correlation between are customers able to finish a transaction or the task that they want to do compared to the performance, and especially if the task is one that you want to be performing revenue. People will leave an application if the performance is poor. You get different statistics whether they'll leave an application with 3 seconds of poor performance or with 5 seconds of poor performance. If it's an application that's unique, they might give it more time, and maybe 7 seconds or 9 seconds. But people will not stay looking at a screen for 20 seconds, and they'll just eventually think that the app has crashed, and they'll swipe up, and they'll try and see. They might give it a second try, and then they'll just say, well, this is something wrong with this application. People are actually more performing of an application that fails because they think they realize it's a bug that can be fixed than an app that has poor performance, and they don't know when that will be fixed. Which brings to, if I can get past this, to my graph, which is the testing cube. So we've talked about functional testing across a set of devices. And in the lab, you test across just the front of this face, where everything is ideal. You've got a great network connection because you're inside of your building. You've got everything is fast. The devices are plugged in, and life is good. When you look at how load impacts performance, you might start with very low load in the lab, medium load, what you might expect to be logging into your application, and very high load. And how does the high load situation, which is loading your back end, affect the functionality and the performance of the functions that you're testing? Things don't work anywhere near as fast when you're under a high load situation. APIs take longer to respond, and the application spends more time waiting. The application has a higher likelihood of timing out in a high load situation than it does in a low load in the lab situation. So mobile testing is more than just mobile functional, it's mobile performance too. So you need to bring in, if you don't have a load testing solution to test your back end, this is a way, this is a cube which demonstrates that you need to do that. There are many API load testing products on the market. There are some from open source and free to commercial, and these will help you burden your back end so that you can see how your front end does when that back end is under load. You do not want to use a mobile testing, a set of devices to load test your back end, because you can't buy enough devices to mimic the number of customers that you'll have on your back end. Now I'll ask even further. Is anybody doing load testing of your back end as part of your mobile front end application testing? No one. All right. So there, I've challenged you to something new as part of your system, and realizing that the application's failure is, in the customer's eyes, it's seen as an application failure when the back end is under load and the application doesn't perform well. And of course, you can, like I said, there are many load testing products that will test your application, mimicking the same API usage of your application from many locations around the cloud. There's solutions from HP and from SOASTA, and from you can use open source JMeter and Gatling and others. So if that's not familiar to you, I can talk about that more after. But the last big tip, knowing your edge. When you have time given back to you by automation, by having a good test plan, what are the areas that you will work on in getting your application out? Is it going to be time to market, that you want to have your application in the market sooner because that's the edge in beating somebody else to market for your application? Or is it going to be maybe adding more functions to the application because you're able to squeeze more in the time you've got, and time to market is not going to be the key differentiator? Or is it something to be competitive against somebody else is in the market and you need to get a feature out before they do? So it's a competitive pressure. And last, prioritize which of these strategies that you'll apply when you have time saved from these categories, whether it's time to market, functional, or competitive, and with your end goal of delivering functions, getting revenue. And with that, I have raced through all of my 7 steps of, and I've got 15 minutes left. So I have to say, where's the baggie in making its way around the room? Oh, already made it to the front. Very functional and very well performed. Oh, wait. Very well performing. Oh, it hasn't gone back yet. It's gone back. Great. Okay. So that was, I have a bad habit of talking too fast, but I hope that if nothing else beyond the 2 things that might have been new to you, RUM and load testing, because those are 2 things that are, they're more bleeding edge and leading edge, and no mobile application stands alone. They now have such a strong back end. So monitoring the user and getting that data back into your site. Let me give you some names also for there. I talked about load testing tools from HP and LoadRunner and SOASTA with Cloud Test and JMeter. On the monitoring side, I used to say Criticism. Criticism is now part of Apptelligence. I looked at the Apptelligence website just the other day and saw not only are they capturing crashes and sessions, so you can see logins and session lengths, but they're capturing other metrics and correlating them even with business metrics so that you can cross that with metrics that you get from your app store or from even other commercial products that are on the market. So helping you see why are you making money in that application and how is the performance and use of that application affecting how much money you're making. Is anybody here not to make money, doesn't need a paycheck or anything? And so, all right. Well, with that, I'll open it up for questions, and I'll also start doing my giveaway. And I'm the only thing standing between us and snack time outside, I believe. So I'll go ahead and do that. But does anyone have any for the one in the back?
Yeah. Do you use user profiles from your marketing team?
User profiles for building out the test plan, or actually personally identify user information. User profiles for sure. I mean, because as part of building out the application, there's a scenario. There are use cases that are defined with user profiles. That there will be Joe Casual who likes to read, who likes to use this application for a little while, and then there's Tammy Intense user who uses only it for periods of time. The real user data will then validate which of those is the more common profile, or how to, what's the priority of them.
So you attach the use paths and then check the data.
Yeah, that's the hard part. Where if you're not collecting data about your users, you're just guessing, and you're having to test every use case and every user profile, persona, and profile, and hoping that you get it right, and that's the one that matches your actual user behavior. It's best to have actual real data. So, and some of this, what I'm talking about in instrumenting an application, means you have to talk to your development team about adding yet one more SDK into the product. And that can sometimes, it's like, why are you asking me to add yet another SDK? But the data is valid and valuable not only to the tester, but to the analyst who's looking at the business side of the application, the marketing team, the product team. So anyway, so I'll start doing, if there's more questions, I'll take those, but I'll get my first drawing card out of here and say, all right, Suresha Lanka is first winner. Come on up here. I'll just have this, I'll come meet you. And I'll actually, do you want a water bottle or a battery? I think, oh, okay. All right. And here's one from Bali, Damian Richard. Oh, same row. And same choice. Water. All right. Let's wait to speed this up. Brady Rogers. Brady? Right there. All right. I'll move this here. Choice? Battery recharger for your phone, or external battery, or water bottle? Shinier. It is pretty shiny. All right. And Orion P. I can't read the rest of it. Protonensis. All right. And three more. That one's blank. There you go. Let's see. Chloe Norris. Come on up. And since I have two more, Joe Wells. Your pick, battery or water. All right. It's enough to charge your phone one time, externally. I'll take it. All right, Joe. And last, Yugesh M. All right, there's that one. Well, I thank you all very much. We do have time for more questions up front. It's also snack times in a couple of minutes outside. And please fill out your evaluations forms to let me know. Hopefully I wasn't too commercial. I try not to be, I didn't do any demos during this one, so I didn't try to be not too commercial. But my company is in the load testing, functional testing, and user market also, real user monitoring. So if you are looking at solutions, that's why they send me as an evangelist out on the road to talk about these in general, but we do have specific solutions too, and we can talk about those. Yeah. Can I do a demonstration? I can bring up some things. Yes. I won't do mobile testing, but I will bring up, I'll bring up our rum product real quick.
What's that?
The real user monitoring product called Impulse. So. Oh, wait, let's see. What's the Wi-Fi password in here, or should I hook up to my...
Well, we can get it to you.
Just add $2 WTC all caps.
Oh, so, but with the $sign at the beginning or the end, or? Okay, 2WTC underscore. And with events in all caps? Okay. Let's hope I typed that right. Please connect. Hey, it worked. All right. Oh, great. Now all the noisy apps come in and start talking. All right. So while that's loading up, this is a real user monitoring application. It is used by, if you look at our logo screen, lots of big companies from Nordstrom and Best Buy and other companies to monitor those user events coming in from customers. And we do it across web and mobile. It's really cool to see on the web side. I'll bring up. I'll bring up that app I had before with this. It takes a little minute. It's got lots of fancy graphics inside of it, so they take a little bit of time to download from the web with OpenGL. And I'll open another dashboard. Well, let's see, we'll just start from that. So this, depending upon the activity of your users around the planet, you will see on an ops globe a dot appear every time a user calls out of your application through an external API that's built in when you use our SDK. Every one of your external API calls gets monitored for what was the latency, what was the return time, and what was the location, what was the browser or the device type, the OS type, the version number, so that you can see how is performance affected across the globe. This one does not have anybody outside of the United States, so I'll just take it over here and spin it to the US, and we can zoom in. And all of this data is shown in real time, so you can see how are things performing right this minute, right this second, as well as how is it performing over time. So the data in all the little graphs is being shown as for the last 30 days. And it's all stored so that you can analyze it after the fact for even deeper data analysis than can be done just here.
So I take it red is bad?
Red is not always bad, and I'll talk about that. That's a great question. Red means it took longer than 7 seconds for that to respond to that user. So you see, not everybody is getting, even in the United States where everybody has good connections, not everybody is getting the same experience. And that's sometimes because of the network type. You can see just by looking at the browsers, this is for a web property. Some people are on Chrome, which is a desktop. A lot of people are on mobile Safari, 24%. So those are people on iOS devices, then desktop Safari, then IE, Firefox. Way down here is Chrome Mobile, so not so many Android customers. Those could be iOS users. Oh, actually, no, here's Chrome Mobile iOS. So not so many Android users data for this.
If you can back up one step, you're obviously monitoring a range of servers all over the US. Or?
Actually, no. This is monitoring the end users of an application. So this is coming from the endpoint farthest away from all the things being delivered from the customer. So this is the customer. And this is coming, in this case, this is coming from the customer's browser. Likewise, this would come from your application with our SDK embedded in it, measuring how is your customer experiencing your application right now. Are they having a good experience or a bad experience?
So the customer would have to install your client?
It's built into the application. In the mobile space, it's built into the application, and in the web space, it's built into the web application. Literally every web page has a little bit of JavaScript in it, or in the mobile app, every mobile app that you ship has that little bit of extra code inside of it. It's one of those other SDKs you embed inside of your application. And then for every API call, automatically this data comes, and you can additionally add other mile points or marker points into your application, like customer did step 1. Great, now customer did step 2, another marker point. Customer did step 3, another marker point. And you can see the performance of the application across all of those marker points. It's also being tracked without any PII, personally identifiable information. It's being tracked to show a session. What did a customer do after they started the application before they stopped using the application? So that you can see point by point how many customers went this way, how many customers went that way, how many customers went that way, et cetera. So you can see what are the user paths through your application from the users themselves. So it's great for seeing real time, how is my application performing? In effect, mostly in this case, how are the devices performing against in the front end versus the back end scenario? Is my back end performing well? Again, we can monitor the back end part of a system, which is the part of, I made an API call, and how long did it take for that API to come back for my application? In this one, it's performing quite well because everything's consistently small. And that means the back-end system and all the things connecting it are running running pretty well. If the green gets too large, then you'll see that your back-end systems are having issues. And of course, the blue is going to get larger too because it can't get any faster. It's built upon waiting for the back-end system to give it data. So
is the service to the company developing an app or some other way you're doing business with?
We sell this product to developers. And whether you're a web developer or a mobile app developer, so that you can see what your customers are doing. Instead of running blind and thinking, my customers might be doing this, my customers might be doing that, my log files tell me they're doing this. This lets you instrument your application to know exactly what your customers are doing. So, good questions. How am I doing? We're down to 5 now. All right, so that gives us any more questions about instrumenting an application for real user monitoring, or?
So the apps which has your software, do they communicate with your servers?
In this case, there are a couple different scenarios for the ways where the data goes. The open source product that we created that does this real user monitoring in the web space makes the data available to you, and you figure out what to do with the data. We've expanded that to say we'll collect the data. We put it up in AWS S3 buckets because S3 servers are really, really cheap in the cloud. We can store, as I said, we collect this data and save it over all time for all of your customers. So for very low cost, we can store that data for you. But that's what turns it from the open source version to the commercial version. Other companies use our open source plugin, and they collect the data or they send it to your laptop or other places. So you pick where the data goes if you use the open source version of the product.
So people who chose not to send the data to you, do they still get this kind of good reporting?
Well, this is part of what we sell, is the beautiful, the beautiful visualizations. You could probably do similar things with Grafana and others, or put the data inside of a tool like Splunk or some other big data storage thing where you could then figure out, or even you could put it in Excel spreadsheets and draw graphs from that. But the visualizations and the analyses that we've got, such as the built-in filters across, let me look at people in just a certain country or just a certain OS. So I could filter out and say, let's just see, actually I'll go to an OS family, and all of this type of thing. These are the things that we built in as part of our commercial version of our product. So. Yeah, you don't get the pretty globe in the open source product. Sorry.
Kind of overhead. Does it add any overhead?
In the web version, it's just a little bit of JavaScript that lives in a web page and waits until the page is loaded, and then grabs data about that complete page load experience and sends it back. And in the mobile version, it gets run every time your application is doing an API call, and it's just starting a timer from the moment the API call starts, looking at the timer when the API is finished, and then sending a ping back to our site. So it's using a little bit of the customer's data bandwidth to send that data, but performance-wise, it's doing very little processing to get that data. But it's amazing the value of that data if you know now how well is my app back-end performing and how is that impacting the front end, and what are my customers doing. And, it's like for just adding a little bit of breadcrumbing into your application, you now know so much about who your user is, what device they're on, what their throughput is looking like, and what they're doing on your application. So.
Are most of your customers folks that are developing products or apps, or are they more like enterprises that have kind of worldwide operations?
Our company started in the load testing market, with testing applications from the cloud when the cloud was just starting about 8 to 10 years ago, and people were having failures that their the data center that they no longer controlled was having failures and they didn't know why, and their customers were having issues. So we started with helping customers test from the cloud from many locations that the cloud provided. What we found though was that a customer running a load test, even after a successful load test, could still fail miserably because they didn't test the right thing, because they didn't know what their customers actually do on their site, what paths they go through. So we had to build a monitoring product that told them, the testing teams, what the customers do. Our major business is still load testing, but we try and convince all of our load testing customers to become monitoring customers too, and even say that that's more important than your load testing. Because if you don't know what your customers are doing and from where they're doing it and on what browsers, you're load testing blind. So
are they product company or enterprises?
If you look at our customers page, you'll see it's lots of big companies with lots of money, but we're trying to grow more into the developer space now, and with new lower pricing and things that make it more attractive to developers, like the open source versions and the free trials and things. So, but yeah, look, there are more people with more at risk. The people who have major sites where downtime equals major loss of revenue, they're the ones who it's easier to get more money out of them because they have so much more at risk. But these concepts are ones that should be applied across whatever size you are. Am I out of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Final question? Anyone?
Oh, so much pressure always to say, who's going to have the final question? All right, well, I'll be cleaning up here for a moment. Thanks all for attending. I really appreciate it.